A delivery driver stopped to help an elderly woman carry her groceries every single day, but when she suddenly disappeared, what he discovered cost him everything he had. This isn't about a good deed that got rewarded with a big check or a viral moment. This is about what happens when kindness becomes complicated, when helping someone pulls you into a situation you never saw coming, and when doing the right thing means losing more than you ever imagined. Stay with me because the twist in this story will hit you harder than you expect. Jake Mitchell was 28 years old and driving for quick ship delivery in Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, just your typical delivery guy hustling to make rent every month. He'd been doing this job for 3 years, and honestly, he was good at it. Fast, reliable, didn't complain. Most days he'd deliver between 150 to 200 packages, running up and down stairs, dodging dogs, dealing with people who acted like their package was a matter of life and death. The route he drove took him through different neighborhoods, rich areas where people had those video doorbells and never actually answered the door, middle-class streets where kids played basketball in driveways. And then there were the older neighborhoods, the ones where houses hadn't been updated since the 1970s, and half the mailboxes were rusted. That's where he met Margaret. Margaret Holloway was 81 years old and lived alone in a small brick house on Maple Street. The paint was peeling, the garden was overgrown, and her mailbox hung at an angle like it might fall off any day. Jake first noticed her about 4 months into his route. She was struggling to carry 2 bags of groceries from a taxi to her front door, moving so slowly that he thought she might collapse right there on her walkway. He parked his truck, jogged over, and grabbed the bags. "Let me help you with those." Margaret looked startled at first, like she wasn't used to people offering help. "Oh, you don't have to do that, young man. I know I don't have to, but I'm already here, so might as well." He carried the bags to her kitchen, and that's when he saw the inside of her house. It wasn't dirty, but it was cluttered in that way that happens when someone gets too old to keep up with things. Stacks of newspapers, medicine bottles on every surface, a walker tucked in the corner, and it was cold, really cold. He could see his breath. "Is your heat working?" Jake asked. "Oh, the furnace is acting up again. The repairman wants $300 just to look at it." She waved her hand, like it was no big deal, but Jake could tell it was. He didn't fix the furnace that day. He had 140 more packages to deliver. But something about Margaret stuck with him. Maybe it was the fact that she reminded him of his own grandmother who'd passed away 2 years earlier. Or maybe it was just that she seemed so alone. The next day, he had a delivery for her street again. He didn't have a package for Margaret, but he knocked on her door anyway. She answered, surprised to see him. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah, just wanted to check if you needed help with anything." And that's how it started. Over the next few weeks, Jake made it a habit. Every time his route took him past Maple Street, he'd stop by. Sometimes Margaret needed groceries carried in. Sometimes she needed a light bulb changed or a box moved from the attic. Small stuff. Things that took him 5 or 10 minutes, but clearly meant the world to her. She'd always offer him cookies or tea, and at first he'd politely decline because he was on a schedule, but eventually he started accepting. He'd sit at her kitchen table for a few minutes while she told him stories about her late husband, who'd been a veteran, about her son who lived in California and called once a month if she was lucky, about the neighborhood back when it was full of young families. Jake learned that Margaret was living on Social Security, about $900 a month. After rent, utilities, and medicine, she had almost nothing left. She qualified for food assistance but was too proud to apply. She'd worked her whole life as a seamstress and didn't want to be seen as someone who needed handouts. "I've always taken care of myself," she told Jake one afternoon. "I don't want to be a burden." "You're not a burden," Jake said. "Everyone needs help sometimes." But here's where things got complicated. One day Jake showed up and found Margaret sitting on her front steps, crying. Actually crying. He'd never seen her like this. "What's wrong? What happened?" She handed him a letter. It was an eviction notice. Her landlord was selling the property, and she had 60 days to move out. 60 days to find a new place, pack up 40 years of memories, and figure out how to afford a new apartment when she could barely afford the one she had. "I don't know what to do," she said, her voice shaking. "I've called every affordable place in the city. There's waiting lists 2 years long. I can't afford anything else. I don't have family here. I don't know where I'm going to go." Jake felt his chest tighten. This wasn't just about carrying groceries anymore. This was serious. This was someone about to end up homeless. He did what he could. He helped her fill out applications for senior housing. He called around to different assistance programs. He even talked to his own landlord about whether there were any affordable units. But everything was too expensive for what Margaret could pay. Weeks went by. The eviction date got closer. Margaret got quieter, more withdrawn. Jake could see the hope draining out of her. Then one night, Jake did something he probably shouldn't have done. He was sitting in his apartment, looking at his bank account. He'd been saving up for a used car. His truck was on its last legs, and he needed something reliable. He had about $8,000 saved. Not a lot, but enough for a decent down payment. He thought about Margaret. He thought about her sitting in a shelter somewhere, or worse. And he made a decision. He offered to pay her rent for 3 months while they figured something out. 3 months at $600 a month. $1,800. It would hurt his savings, but it wouldn't destroy them. Margaret refused at first. Absolutely refused. But Jake insisted. Look, think of it as a loan. When you get into senior housing, whenever that happens, you can pay me back little by little. No pressure. I just need to know you have a roof over your head. She finally agreed, tears running down her face. You're a good person, Jake. Better than most. So Jake paid. Month 1, month 2, month 3. And during those months, he kept helping. He'd stop by almost every day now. He'd bring her groceries, help her sort through things to pack, drive her to doctor's appointments when she needed it. His own boss started noticing he was falling behind on deliveries. But Jake didn't care. Some things were more important than numbers on a screen. But here's what Jake didn't know. Margaret's son, Derek, the one who called once a month from California, had been monitoring his mother's bank account. He had power of attorney, set up years ago when Margaret first started showing signs of memory problems. And when he saw mysterious deposits and withdrawals, he got suspicious. Derek flew to Ohio unannounced. He showed up at Margaret's house while Jake was there helping her organize old photos. Derek took one look at Jake, looked at the situation, and immediately assumed the worst. Who are you and what are you doing with my mother's money? Jake was confused. I'm not doing anything with her money. I'm helping her. Helping her? You're a delivery driver who's somehow in her house every day and suddenly money is moving around in her account. Margaret tried to explain. She told Derek about the eviction, about how Jake had helped her, about how he'd paid her rent. But Derek wasn't listening. Or maybe he was listening, but hearing something different. He's taking advantage of you, Mom. Can't you see that? Within a week, Derek had hired a lawyer. He accused Jake of elder abuse, financial exploitation, and manipulation. He filed a restraining order preventing Jake from coming within 500 feet of Margaret. He threatened criminal charges. Jake was devastated. He tried to explain to the lawyer, to anyone who would listen, that he was just trying to help. He showed them bank statements proving he'd paid money, not taken it. He had nothing to hide. But here's the thing about the legal system. Once accusations start flying, your life gets turned upside down whether you're guilty or not. Jake had to hire his own lawyer, which cost money he didn't have. His company found out about the restraining order and put him on suspension pending investigation. No work meant no income. His landlord got nervous about the legal trouble and asked him to move out. In the span of 3 weeks, Jake lost his job, his apartment, and his savings paying for legal fees. All because he tried to help an elderly woman who had no one else. The case eventually got dismissed. The lawyer looked at all the evidence and determined there was no wrongdoing. Margaret testified that Jake had only ever been kind to her, that he'd never asked for anything in return, that he'd actually given her money, not taken it. Derek was forced to drop the accusations. But the damage was done. Jake was broke. Actually broke. He'd spent his savings on lawyers. He'd lost his job. He was staying on a friend's couch trying to figure out what to do next. Margaret tried to help him. She wanted to give him money, to pay him back, to do something. But she didn't have anything to give. And Derek, feeling guilty but too proud to admit he was wrong, moved Margaret to California to live near him. She didn't want to go, but she didn't have much choice. The last time Jake saw Margaret was the day before she left. They met at a coffee shop, the only neutral location Derek would allow. She held his hands across the table and cried. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I never wanted this to happen to you." "It's not your fault," Jake told her. "I'd do it again. I don't regret helping you. You lost everything because of me." "No, I lost things. Stuff I can get back. You didn't lose your dignity. You didn't end up on the street." That's what matters. She gave him a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a silver pocket watch that had belonged to her late husband. The note said, "To the kindest person I've ever known, you remind me that good people still exist. Never stop being who you are." Jake kept that watch, even when things got really bad. When he was sleeping in his car for a few weeks. When he had to take a job washing dishes just to eat, he kept that watch. It reminded him of why he'd made the choices he made. It took Jake 8 months to get back on his feet. He found a new delivery job, saved up enough for a security deposit on a small studio apartment, slowly rebuilt what he'd lost. He never heard from Margaret again. Derek made sure of that. But he thought about her often, wondered if she was okay, if she ever thought about him. Then one day, about a year after everything fell apart, Jake got a letter forwarded from his old address. It was from a law office in California. His hands shook as he opened it. Margaret had passed away, peacefully, in her sleep, and she'd updated her will in the months before she died. She left Jake $10,000. Not because she owed him, the letter explained, but because she wanted him to know that his kindness had meant everything to her final years. She wanted him to have something to rebuild with, to chase dreams with, to know that he was seen and valued. Jake sat in his tiny apartment and cried. Not because of the money, though it would help. He cried because someone had seen him, really seen him. All the people who'd accused him, who'd doubted his motives, who'd assumed the worst, they'd been wrong. Margaret knew. She'd always known. Here's what nobody tells you about kindness. Sometimes it costs you. Not just time or money, but pieces of yourself. Sometimes helping people gets messy and complicated and blows up in your face. Sometimes you get punished for doing the right thing. Sometimes the world looks at your best intentions and sees something ugly. But that doesn't make it wrong. That doesn't mean you stop. Because the alternative is a world where nobody helps anyone, where we all look the other way, where elderly women sit on front steps crying with nowhere to go and nobody cares. Jake lost his job, his savings, his home. But he didn't lose himself. He didn't become bitter. He didn't decide that helping people wasn't worth it. Because somewhere in all that mess, an 81-year-old woman who'd been invisible to almost everyone felt seen, felt valued, felt like she mattered. And in her final act, she made sure Jake knew he mattered too. A delivery driver stopped to help an elderly woman every single day. It cost him more than he thought. It cost him almost everything. But what he gained, what they both gained, was something money can't buy. The knowledge that in a world that often feels cold and uncaring, there are still people who choose kindness even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The next video will show you another side of humanity you need to see.